ultra-dimensional unknowns. What do they want? Are we about to come face to face with them, whether we're ready or not? Find out from the world's leading experts in this very special edition of Raiders Live News Talk Radio. You're listening to RNN Radio, where thinking people tune in.
Well, this is the Raiders Live News Talk Radio Show. I am your host, Tom Horn, and of course, as always, joined in the studio tonight by that Triple Crown winner herself, Nita Horn. Who else also but the wild man, Joe Artis, as we welcome you back to this special edition of Raiders Live News Talk Radio on the timely subject, official disclosure, prepare for contact. Now it is our privilege to spend the next segment with our friend and prophecy expert, L.A. Marzulli. Dr. Marzulli is the author of the Nephilim Trilogy, as well as the non-fiction works, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, but his latest offering, The Alien Interviews. 17 personal, intense interviews with people who have been directly involved with the UFO phenomenon. Dr. Marzulli has lectured on this subject, presenting his exhaustive research at conferences, churches, as well as appearances and interviews on numerous national radio and television programs around the world. As a matter of fact, I happen to know that he has just filmed, we're going to ask him about this tonight, more than an hour with the History Channel. And if that's not enough, L.A. Marzulli is also an accomplished musician. He's recorded numerous CDs. We're going to ask him about that later, too. But for now, from somewhere in his secret laboratory near sandy California beaches, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to this hour Dr. L.A. Marzulli. Good evening, L.A.
Good evening, Tom. Nice to be on your show.
Hey, it's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, it's certainly our delight that you could join us for this special series. Well, how's the weather, by the way, there in California right now?
You're going to hate me. I'm in a sleeveless T-shirt and shorts.
Not fair.
Okay?
Not fair.
I was at a conference in Wyoming. It was 18 degrees. We had a foot of snow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, I'm instantly sorry that I even asked the question. Now, we got a lot of territory to cover tonight. This spate of recent news concerning the big question, are we alone in the universe, that's coming out of the Royal Society, that's been happening over the last couple of weeks. I've got something like 15 headlines in front of me right now. One of them that came out today where the Queen's main astronomer, Lord Martin Rees, the headline is, Royal Astronomer says aliens may be staring us in the face. Others, Drake wants off-world listening posts for alien messages. Lynn, what can you tell us about these meetings and the material that's being covered right now? Because I think we are living in an unprecedented moment in time.
Well, I would certainly agree with you 100%. This is all part of what I have termed the coming great deception and the Luciferian endgame. These people that are, they're slowly beginning to release information. We know that the UK, France, Belgium, Mexico, and Brazil all have released classified documents talking about UFO sightings from, the 50s up to the present time. What are we looking at here? In my opinion, the old guard in the United States probably left over from the Truman era, and this is just, I'm just travel with me here. I can't prove this. It's just a hunch. But some of the old guard remains, and this is what's holding it back in essence of just releasing it to the public. On the other hand, when you get someone like Edgar Mitchell coming out on Kerrang Radio last year stating that, hey, Roswell happened and the craft was real, it was carried on Drudge. I know Hannity did a full-on interview with Mitchell, but most people just kind of bat an eyelash and go back to watching American Idol and it's business as usual. There will be full disclosure, Tom. Of course, my belief system is yours. This is not some friendly ETs from the Pleiades, and my research has uncovered very recently some very disturbing, very graphic information from a man who used to be on the lifelong law enforcement homicide detective, and he's coming on the record actually on my show, Acceleration Radio, next Wednesday, talking about human mutilations. So for those people in the exopolitic movement who are saying that, maybe it's another race of ET that's doing this, or some of them are benevolent while others are malevolent, in my opinion, they're shape-shifting. They can appear as they want to appear to people, and it goes right along. I don't know whether you've seen the movie by Ben Stein, Expelled. At the very end of the movie, I think he's sitting down with Richard Dawkins, and he asks him, okay, where did life begin? And Dawkins kind of raises his eyebrow and begins, well, maybe millions of years ago in a far-off galaxy, millions of years away, light years away, and Stein just looks at him because it's such an intellectually bankrupt argument. He has no clue where life began, nor does anyone else, really. So what we're looking at, in my opinion, is the coming great deception. And what it's promulgating is the alien gospel, another term I've coined, which basically is this. The so-called extraterrestrials created all life on planet Earth. They genetically manipulated us. They were responsible for the nascent civilizations which sprung up over the planet. They created the megalithic monuments that, let's say, Zechariah Sitchin and von Däniken are always pointing to. They also created the world's religions, and they were looked upon by our ancestors as gods. Now they are back at this very critical juncture to help us through in this, to advance us in this next spiritual paradigm. So this, in my opinion, after researching this for decades, literally, it's closer now than ever before. It will come in a time of fear, because the Luciferians generate fear, their currency is fear, they move in fear, every action that they do creates fear. Just look at the cattle mutilations, the abduction phenomena, the people who are implanted. It always creates fear, and this is where it's going, and when the war in the Middle East happens, which is my scenario in politics, prophecy, and supernatural, and look, it's just a scenario, but it's based on lots of study with prophecy, Ezekiel 38 war certainly. When a nuclear bomb, not if, when a nuke goes off in the Middle East, and perhaps dirty bombs in this country, it will create the greatest collective fear that this planet has ever known. The greatest collective fear. Humankind will be standing at the precipice of disaster, wondering, oh my gosh, are we all going to get nuked tomorrow? And it's a perfect time for 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile wide craft manifesting over the cities of the world. And Tom and Nita, when that happens, it will cause the great falling away, which is talked about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 4, where millions of people, paradigm will be changed almost instantaneously. And they literally will believe this deception that the so-called alien race created all life on this planet. I'll close with this. The Raelians, who are about 75 to 80,000 people strong, follow this guy Claude Vorlohorn. That was his old name before he met the Elohim, and he changed his name to Rael. He proclaims that he has the same father, the same alien father, as Jesus. I'm not making this stuff up. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is how bizarre it is. Well, this is 30 years ago, and now they've got embassies. They're trying to build an embassy in Jerusalem, so when the Space Brothers come, they'll be ready for them. That's just one example. These people, the Raelians, already believe in the so-called alien gospel, as is Zechariah Sitchin, and it's certainly Eric von Däniken. So I'm standing here going, no, this is deception. The guidebook of the supernatural, i.e. the Bible, tells us that the elect would be deceived if that were possible, that men feigning from fear from what is coming on the earth, that Lucifer will come with all signs and lying wonders. So you start putting that stuff together, and then you look what's manifesting on the planet. UFO sightings are about over 300 every single month. And in 1950, the year I was born, Tom, there was one in the month of December. Go to 2008, there's 353 sightings in that same month, 2008. So UFOs are real, burgeoning, not going away. It's time for us to decide what worldview we're going to take, and looking at them, what paradigm best fits the phenomena. And, of course, that's what I write about and talk about and blog about, like yourself, Anita, constantly.
Is it prophecy that this whole UFO phenomenon has something to do with all this other mysterious phenomenon, where if you kind of just take it right down to its roots, it appears to be something that is moving in and out of our three-dimensional reality at will. We're catching glimpses of it. We're trying to understand it. A moment ago, we were talking to Stanton Friedman, who was the original civilian investigator into the Roswell event. They're trying to make sense from a very kind of scientific point of view about what this is. What is it? What's appearing in our reality and then disappearing? And can we kind of wrap our minds around it in terms of physics or quantum physics and understand? But now, from a biblical point of view, you would be saying this is something entirely different, and is it also prophesied? In other words, how does the modern UFO phenomenon tie in with ancient manuscripts, with ancient prophecies, and is that what we're seeing now in this profusion of increased UFO phenomenon in our world today?
Well, the short answer to that, of course, is yes. What we're looking at is the manifestation of the fallen angels. We're told, we get this one glimpse, this one amazing sentence, which most biblical commentators, unfortunately, through the centuries have overlooked. It's right there, plain as can be, in the guidebook of the supernatural, and basically it says, the Son of Man will return, or when the Son of Man returns, it will be like the days of Noah. It's Yahshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah, talking about his second coming. So that's right from the man himself, saying that at some point in time I am going to return. When the Son of Man returns, it will be like the days of Noah. That sets up a whole conundrum. It sets up this a red flag. It's a flare going up into the night sky, and basically it points us to the days of Noah. And that begs the question: what differentiates the days of Noah, those particular days, and any other time in history? And in my opinion, it is the presence of the B'nai Elohim. I'm sure Chuck Missler got into this. Dr. I.D. Thomas was really, in my opinion, one of the first people, if not the first, to make this connection back into the fallen angels. There are scholars, biblical scholars, who will quibble over that B'nai Elohim is somehow not angels. It doesn't differentiate between fallen and good. But for the purposes of this discussion, without getting into a detailed theological explanation, this is the fallen angels. When all through the Old Testament that word is used, it specifically refers to angels. And what we see from extra-biblical books, such as the Book of Enoch, which amplify the text of Genesis, we know that these fallen angels came to earth. They descended, according to the Book of Enoch, on Mount Hermon, 200 strong, and then perhaps later on, others came. Now here's something we're talking about, coming in from different dimensions. We know that there's three heavens. The first is earth, the second is the air around the earth that extends to space. The third is actually the real thing. That's where the Godhead is, right in the third heaven. We know the enemy, Lucifer, has been bound and changed over to the second heaven. So what we're looking at in Mount Hermon, it's some sort of a portal, some sort of a gateway, which allows these entities to touch down and to pass through the second heaven into the first heaven, or this dimension. We also know from the guidebook of the supernatural that Yahshua HaMashiach, the transfiguration, where he took several disciples, went up onto a mountain, and all of a sudden the scene changed. Moses and Elijah were there. Yahshua's garments became white as snow, brilliant light. They heard this voice. They didn't see anything, and of course the whole vision ended. A lot of biblical commentators believe that was the same mountain, Mount Hermon, that the fallen angels descended on. In my opinion, it was like Yeshua going back to that and kind of putting a stake in the ground and going, no, this is ours now. This is mine. I'm reclaiming this. Just a thought. But what we're seeing at thousands and thousands of years ago is the manifestation of the B'nai Elohim, the fallen angels. And what they did is they cohabited. They had sex with the women of the earth. And from that union between the fallen angel and the women of earth, this ungodly abomination known as the Nephilim were born. They were hybrids, half fallen angel, half human. And this is the reason for the flood. This is the reason why Genesis 6 tells us Noah is pure in all his generations. What are they pointing to? In my book, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, and of course the Alien Interviews, we kind of touch on this. Mostly in PP and F, I quote several people. This man, Dehan, does a wonderful expository of what that passage means. It doesn't mean that Noah was sinless. It means that his bloodline essentially was intact. What we're looking at, Tom, and this is what people need to get their heads around, and this is something I'm writing and dealing with in the 2012 book, which will be out in about 8 months, but it has to do with this cosmic chess match. And this is what we see all throughout the the timeline of the biblical timeline. There's a move, counter move, and we see it for thousands of years. What differentiates those days were the presence of the Nephilim on the planet. Now the leap is, are we seeing that today? The short answer to that is yes. Here's how it happened. We know that in the ancient world, blood sacrifice opened portals. We know that. Mm-hmm. We also know that satanic rituals today open portals. We know that in World War II, 6 million Jews were offered, literally, as a Luciferian sacrifice, the body stacked like cordwood. The word Holocaust comes from the word Holocaustin, which means a burnt offering as on an altar. And it was a burnt offering on an altar to the would-be god Satan. It cracked open a portal. What do we see at the end of World War II? We see these globes of light, balls of light, which were named Foo Fighters. Some people have reported seeing similar lights in and around the fields when crop circles are made. I believe that this cracked open these portals, which were guarded on some level. We're not told how. That's another discussion we can get into. I'm speaking of Daniel and the angelic visitor, and how he has 21 days and he has to fight his way through, get reinforcements, and come back. But that's a long, kind of drawn-out explanation to get into. But what we also see is that the 1 billion abortions since Roe v. Wade globally has actually increased that blood sacrifice. For some of your listeners who are pro-abortion, they'll look at that and they'll go, what is he talking about? That's crazy. What people don't understand is that there's great spiritual significance when a fetus is killed in the womb. And the first record of that, as far as I know, comes from the book of Enoch, specifically from one of the fallen angels. And the account of the book of Enoch is very succinct, where it tells us that this one angel taught the women how to kill the embryo in the womb. That book is thousands of years old, and in my opinion, we get the first sort of abortion at least recorded. It came right out of the pit of hell, literally from a fallen angel. So this is what's going on today. It's modern clinical blood sacrifice, but nonetheless blood sacrifice happening globally, which of course, whether a person is aware of it or not, is a satanic link. It opens up satanic portals, and this is why this stuff is manifesting in greater numbers than ever before.
Wow, Lynn, let's take a moment to tell people how they can learn more about you, your books, your research. Where can they go to learn more?
The best place is the website, and from there they can go right to the blog. I blog 5 days a week. They've got links to the blog, to the radio show, the whole thing. lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net, L-A-M-A-R-Z, as in zebra, U-L-L-I.net, lamarzulli.net.
And, of course, we will also include this in the commercially produced product. I mentioned to Chuck Missler last night that Dr. I.D.E. Thomas was the grandfather of this line of thought within modern evangelical eschatology, which, of course, he recognized in his Alien Encounter books. He also mentioned that last night. But he also says that he believes that there is a manifestation within our world today. People are looking at this, they're talking about it as UFOs, maybe contact by aliens. He says that this is interdimensional, as opposed to travel from far distances, which we were talking a moment ago to a scientist about. Are you also among those, the intelligentsia that we are interviewing this week, who believe that this is interdimensional? It's side by side. It's extra-dimensional. It's not something that's coming here somehow with a nuts and bolts kind of technology from a far universe?
Yeah, again, the short answer to that is yes. I believe that this is interdimensional beings which are accessing our space-time continuum, more than likely from the second heaven. We're not told exactly how that works, but we see it. One of the interesting correlations I make, and I speak about this and really lay it out in the alien interviews. After the 17 interviews that you read, I begin to talk about what I believe is a cause and what we're looking at. And basically what we see is that the laws of physics completely bend. For instance, when a person is abducted, they often find themselves being levitated. They're also paralyzed. They find themselves levitated in paralysis. They're unable to speak, and yet they're wide awake. They're then floated through walls or windows and taken to a ship. Okay, we just left Kansas. Okay, we really did. We're into some stuff that is physically impossible from our particular laws of physics. We just completely shattered them all. Have no idea what we're doing. Now let's take a look at, and this is the example I use. Peter, one of the apostles, is in jail. An angel appears to him, very much like the abductions, except this is a good guy. He comes through the wall, just like the Gracie. They just appear from nowhere. They come through the walls. The angel in Peter's cell does the same thing. Peter's not sure he's awake or is asleep. So he's almost not shut off, but just the presence of this angelic being is enough to just kind of short-circuit Peter out. He then notices that everyone around him is completely asleep. Then his chains fall off of him. The angel doesn't touch him. The locks just spring, fall off of him. The prison door unlocks itself, swings open. All the guards are asleep, okay? They get to the main gate of the prison. Without touching it, the angel manipulates matter and space. The prison doors open, and Peter leaves. The similarities between what these the good angelic beings do and what the bad angelic beings do cannot be overlooked. They're similar because they are the same entity, albeit the fallen ones are fallen. But it's just like, and this is the analogy I use, it's like we're men, and you know, you're a good guy, I'm a good guy. But when you have Adolf Hitler, he's not a good guy. But we're men. He has the same gifting. He can see, he can talk, he can smell, he can use his intellect. His body moves him about. We all have the same gifts as men, but Hitler chose to use those gifts, those imbued gifts that were given to him for obviously evil purposes, whereas we choose them for good. It's sort of a weak analogy perhaps, because most people, angelic beings, were just given a glimpse as to what they can do. But I think it speaks, and it speaks of the difference between a good man and a bad man, and how that can relate to the good angels and the fallen angels. Hopefully that's clear.
Lynn, wanted to ask you what your recent discovery concerning the cattle mutilation phenomena.
Well, the cattle mutilation phenomena, I've spoken with Chuck Zukowski. There's also a ongoing slap in another state, which I won't name because the people want to remain anonymous, so I don't give any information out that way. I'll do it off the record if you're interested. But yeah, the cattle mutilations have gone destructive. This is according to Chuck Zukowski, who's been looking at this for quite some time. He's a MUFON investigator. And Chuck's been on my show. We've had lengthy conversations, both on the record and off the record. And, you know, Chuck believes, as I do, that the cattle mutilation phenomena have now gone destructive. What I mean by that is they used to just take core out of an eye, take the tongue, maybe part of the rectum. Now, more and more of the animal is gone. And it's very, very destructive. And yet, the same evidence that we see. The animal there's no blood. The coyotes won't touch it. It's dropped from nowhere. No footprints around these things. I mean, it's very, very horrific. And of course, what puts it completely into another area is when you start talking about the human mutilations, which are ongoing. And when you take the human mutilations and we look and we see what the Book of Enoch tells us, again, this was back in the days of Noah, we realize that they began to eat and drink the flesh of men. That's what we hear from the Book of Enoch. And what we're seeing now is the UFO phenomena is beginning to parallel that. As humans are being taken, and the stuff is, I mean, I won't get into it on the air, but it's very incredibly horrific. I'll say this. There's one, if you Google human mutilation pictures, images on Google, more than likely an autopsy photograph of a human being will come up, and it's a full shot, head to foot, of a naked man who's been mutilated. That is real. That is real. And this particular researcher that I'm talking to actually has the forensic detailed, exactly what happened forensically to this body to cause the wounds. He's actually got the report from the coroner, from the autopsy that was conducted. So this stuff is ongoing. He's actually investigating something back in Pennsylvania where a man went up to go deer hunting, and he got on his ATV. 2 hours later, he was still missing, or he didn't return home. Several hours later, he was still missing. His wife called. The investigators came out. They tried to find the man. Couldn't find anything. They did find a shoe way up on top of a tree, like 30, 40 feet up. 3 days later, the man's naked body is found, drained of blood, in his bushes by the house. And the thing is that these bushes were about 50 feet from the house, 50, 75 feet from the house, and the task force and dogs, the cadaver dogs, everyone passed these things for the last 3 days. So the body was put there right under everybody's nose, so to speak, at the end of the third day. And they found it, and which is interesting, the body was immediately taken without a coroner on the scene, which is illegal. You have to have a coroner on the scene to pronounce the body dead. That was not done. So really weird stuff going on there. They're trying to get to the end of that. This particular researcher was there, saw the body, and the body was frozen in a look of absolute terror with its hands in front of its face like he was trying to ward off something. So that's what we're looking at. In my opinion, all that to say this, in my opinion, and I realize there are people in the exopolitic crowd that don't agree with me, this phenomena is incredibly malevolent.
And Lynn, did I understand you to say that the animals would not even eat the remains?
Yeah, the coyotes, which will eat anything. I mean, I live in an area in California where there's coyotes, and it's like, you leave anything out, the coyotes will strip it down to the bone and then chew those. All these animals, the one that I'm investigating, the ones that Chuck Zukowski's investigating, the carcass just sits there week after week after week. The coyotes won't go near it. The one that I'm looking into now, this man had a couple of dogs. They were out for this walk, and the dogs found it, and then something spooked them, and the dogs ran away from the carcass. This man walks by this carcass almost 2 or 3 times a week. The dogs won't even go near it anymore. So, and the carcass, last time I talked to him, which was about a week ago, the carcass was still there untouched by coyotes or other animals, and that's just unprecedented. Coyotes will go and eat anything.
Lynn, different respected, even secular researchers like Jacques Vallée, Dr. John Mack, they found that there is a strong similarity between the history of the Watchers, Nephilim, even historical demonology, and this activity of so-called aliens. And in many of these abduction cases, there has been, in their own research, the removal of ovum, scoop marks, turn up in skin. It appears that physical, samples are somehow of human DNA. They're being collected, and a lot of these UFO flap areas, these animals you're talking about, historically they've turned up with material removed from their bodies, almost with like laser-like skill, something like surgical, laser-like. But lately, I have noticed that some of these reports are very much like what you're talking about now. It almost seems like something has been ratcheted up now to an entirely new level. And Lynn, why would they be collecting human DNA? What would be the purpose behind that, or even animal DNA?
Well, again, they're making a hybrid. I mean, Dr. Jacobs, I don't know whether he's coming on in your forum or not, but Jacobs has been looking into the alien breeding program for decades, and he believes, like I do, that these hybrids have reached a point where they can pass into the general population, which of course is incredibly unnerving when one begins to think about that. Jacobs also believes, like I do, and I'm not trying to put words in the man's mouth, he's not here, but he believes that it's very malevolent, and that these beings, these entities, do not have our best interests at heart. And so he's very aware of the breeding program, and he looks at it and treats it, as I do, as something very, very suspicious and malevolent, certainly malevolent. And I believe, again, look, what differentiates the days of Noah? The Nephilim were present, the fallen angels were present. It's really the only time in history where you can really look at it and say, ha-ha, it's a major, major marker. Everything is gone for thousands of years pretty much the same, except for that one period of time, which actually resulted in the flood of Noah. And by the way, for those of you out there scoffing when I say the flood of Noah, every single culture on this planet has some sort of a flood legend in its history, which is just unbelievable. Something happened in antiquity. Everything was wiped out except for 8 people. And it's because of the presence of the B'nai Elohim, and they're having sex with the women, producing this hybrid called a Nephilim. Another interesting dynamic is we get this bit of prophecy in Daniel where it says, their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to them. And that word cleave is exactly the same word that we see back in Genesis where it talks about given in marriage. So we see a differentiation. We see that in Genesis 6, they took wives. In other words, there was a marriage contract between the fallen angel and the woman. And later on, as Daniel's pointing to, and by the way, Jim Williamson was the one who uncovered this, so all credit to Jim. But what we get in the modern era, we get their seed mingling, but there is no cleaving, there is no marriage. They take the women, they abduct the women, either they become impregnated, and the third month, the fetus, they're then reabducted, the fetus is then taken, and usually later on, 3, 4, 5 years later, they're reabducted, and certainly in the earlier days, back in the 80s and 90s, they're shown very sickly human/alien, or in this particular case, I would say fallen angel, hybrids, stringy hair, large eyes, thin limbs, very pale complexion. Now that's, decades ago. Apparently, the breeding program is so vigorous and such now where they have created the hybrids that can pass, except some of these hybrids, or many of these hybrids, can have superhuman power. So when this thing hits, Tom, and it's not, look, I'm not a date center, but this thing is going to happen. There is going to be this full-on disclosure. When it happens, the hybrids who are already placed will become, very evident. It's going to be nasty. It's going to be really nasty when this thing finally gets revealed.
Look, you mentioned Jim Williamson. He endorsed a book that we're going to publish. You endorsed it too. It's by Joe Jordan, David Ruffino. It's based on 20 years of research, 300 plus actual cases of people who have been delivered from what the public, they would call alien abduction, but they were delivered through the name of Jesus. This adds such a spiritual dynamic to this, a biblical dynamic to this, and as far as I know, this is the first time in such studies that you had this analytical duplication using guidelines for redundancy similar to methods that are employed by scientists, investigators to illustrate what? Repeatability? Something has been happening from the beginning of time. Is this what we're talking about, that there is a supernaturalism, a demonism, or whatever it is subject to the name of Jesus Christ?
Well, and again, we're not talking churchianity here, we're not talking religion, we're talking about a man, a God-man, who when he incarnated here, let's just kind of walk through this a little bit and strip it down and expose what really happened. If you were a leper, and I love this analogy, and or this reading from the Guidebook of the Supernatural. And folks out there, you're listening, and I'm using the word Guidebook of the Supernatural rather than Bible, because Bible just means book, okay? What the book really is a guidebook to the supernatural. It shows us how to interface with these beings, with the good angels. It shows us how to not to engage with the wrong ones. It tells us what to do, what not to do, as far as, let's say, necromancy, with talking to the dead, divination, scrying, all those things. It tells us how to stay away from those things and the reasons why. But Yeshua, Jesus, when he was on the planet, this is an incredible story. In the ancient world, if you had leprosy, it was a death sentence. No doubt about it. It was a death sentence. And you were ostracized from family and friends and doomed to this long, slow, painful death where you would watch your flesh rot in front of you, and then eventually you would die. Well, Jesus is out talking to a group of people, and these lepers, 10 of them, cry off from afar away, because remember, the leprosy is, they're ostracized, they can't come close. Son of David, which is a title of kingship, have mercy on us. And Jesus says, go your way, you are healed. And the lepers are instantly healed. Now, let's stop there. The lepers are instantly healed. Not over a period of days or weeks or hours or minutes. They're instantly healed, which means Yahshua is manipulating them on the molecular cellular level, the atomic level. He's down and he's manipulating matter and energy in ways that we have no idea how he's doing it, which is why we call it miraculous, and they're restored. Their flesh is restored instantaneously. One more. Yahshua is out and he's asleep in a boat. Jesus is asleep in a boat. This huge storm is encircling. Waves are crashing on the boat. The people that are with him, his buds, are freaking out. They're going, we're going to drown. They're both going to go in. We're all going to die out here. They wake up Yahshua. He looks at them and he says, where's your faith? 2 words, be calm. That's it. Be calm. Now, the storm doesn't slowly dissipate. The wind doesn't slowly die down. It says instantly. In other words, be calm, and it's like instant calm. How does he do that? And we all know the kind of energy that's in a storm. Somehow he's able to manipulate it just with his word. He's able to manipulate this. So what we're seeing is that there was, according to the mythos, the Christian mythos, and I believe in it, which is why I am a Christian, but what we see is benevolent acts by this man over and over and over again, and to us they are absolutely supernatural, totally supernatural. With that in mind, the paradigm that I embrace with the UFO phenomena is one of supernatural events. There's a war going on. This war has been going on for thousands of years between the fallen angels and the good angels. It's been this cosmic chess game which we see move, counter move, move. We see this for thousands and thousands of years. It's playing out now because the enemy knows his time is short. He's coming, as just as prophecy tells us, with all signs and lying wonders. That's what prophecy tells us, and that's what's manifesting now. And he's creating this deception that even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. There are those who have studied the phenomena, and like yourself and Chuck Missler and others, we all talking about the same idea, pointing to the guidebook of the supernatural, saying this is the coming great deception. This is the alien gospel, which is going to cause people to fall away and to create this one world religious system, one world global economic system too. So it's very tenuous times that we're living in, Tom, and it's when we look at all this spiritual manifestation, supernatural manifestation happening on the planet, and I'm speaking of crop circles, the UFOs, which are seen in the hundreds, cattle mutilations, the abduction phenomena, the alien implants, which Dr. Lear, I've interviewed him. He comes on the Alien Interview book. Incredible interview where he's done now 16 of these, and this is like nanotechnology. It's just the blood vessels wrap around this little implant the size of a BB, and it might be changing humans' DNA. So this is what we're dealing with, as Linda Moulton Howe says. It's high strangeness, and we're up to our necks in it.
Yeah. Lynn, this is Joe. I want to ask you something. Let's go back for just a minute here to UFOs. What would you say to a skeptic regarding the UFO phenomena?
Well, look, and I realize this is incredibly self-serving, but it is a plug. But I wrote the Alien Interviews book to give to the skeptic. That's what that book's about. There are 5 PhDs that come on the record, and these people, their credentials are impeccable. 5 PhDs come on the record, and they've all had direct contact with the phenomena. These aren't, some guy with a couple of six-packs out on a fishing trip someplace in the middle of nowhere. These are people that weren't looking for this, and it found them. And now they talk about it. And then there's others that come on the record and talk about their experience. At the end of the book, I weigh in. All that to say, the UFO phenomena is real, burgeoning, and not going away. We have to begin to deal with it. When we have, I said this at the beginning of the interview, Tom, when we've got the UK, and we got France, and Belgium, and Brazil, and Japan, and Mexico, all stating, and guys like Edgar Mitchell, all stating that, this stuff is, we don't know what it is, but these craft move with impunity in our skies. Surely, we may differ, and that's, I'm sure you're getting different opinions. We may differ as to what the cause of the phenomena is, but we can agree that UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. And the bottom line is, when you see one, like Ricky Sorrell from the Stevensville, Texas, sighting that comes on the record in my book, The Alien Interviews, riveting interview. I spoke to him at least a dozen times, and Ricky never embellished his story, never changed his tune. He looked up, he was out deer hunting one day, he got caught up in some brambles, he looks up, and there's this huge craft over his head. He looked in all directions and could not see the end of it. He estimated the craft was about a mile wide. As Stanton Friedman says, that's a mothership. And, he was completely overwhelmed by the experience, and rightfully so. A mile-wide craft that's floating above your head, making no noise and defying the laws of physics and operating with some technology that we don't have any idea about, and then vanishes, moves off into the distance and then slowly vanishes, that's got to really mess with your head. It'll mess with your paradigm. Let me close that by saying this, and with all due respect to Catholics. The supernatural is manifesting on this planet, literally. And it continues to manifest, and it's actually burgeoning. It's increasing. When we look back at the Fatima apparitions in 1917, and I use this because, in my opinion, it was a harbinger, it was a dry run, a precursor of what is coming on the earth. And what we saw was 70,000 people believed that this phenomena was the Mary of the Bible. With all due respect to Catholics, again, it was not the Mary of the Bible. When we go back and we look at what the eyewitnesses are talking about, the miracle of the sun, and let's quick backstory, 70,000 people are in a field, Fatima, Portugal, 1917, because 3 children are claiming to see the Mary of the Bible. The local priest and bishop and Monsignor are asking for a sign. The kids go back, talk to the apparition. The apparition says, come on October 13th, 1917, there will be a sign. The kids go back, tell them, 70,000 people show up for this event, Tom. It's raining all day. It's a drizzle. The apparition was supposed to show up by 12 o'clock. It's an hour late. It shows up at 1. The kids see it. No one else does. All of a sudden, the sky parts, and the sun begins to dance, at least look like it's dancing. It's spinning. It's throwing out all these different colors. Then it begins to wobble like a crazy pendulum and slowly descend on the crowd. Everyone's clothes were soaked up to that point because it had been raining. Their clothes are dry. There's some sort of a yellow, like powdery substance which falls on the crowd. Amber light. People think it's the end of the world. There's mass pandemonium. The bottom line is this: 70,000 people's paradigm is instantly rocked because they've encountered something supernatural and they don't know what it is. They can't get their head around it. The witnesses there believe that what they saw, and this is witness testimony over and over again, I looked up and saw a dull disc. I looked up and saw a silver disc. I saw a dull spinning silver disc. All those words, especially the word disc, is used over and over again. I believe if we were standing out in that field, knowing what we know now, we would go, oh my gosh, it's a UFO, flying saucer. But those 2 terms were not in the vernacular at the time. That would come much later in the century. Remember, this is 1917. So I use that example as a very graphic example of what happens to people when they encounter something supernatural and they don't have any background in this. I have learned to, and it's a phrase that I've coined again, rebuke first, ask questions later. If you're out there and you see something manifest, rebuke it by the blood of the Lamb. You say it out loud and you rebuke it. Don't get mesmerized by it like Ricky Searle, because it is overwhelming when you see it. It's just like the 70,000 people standing in that field in Fatima. It is overwhelming, and at that point it's too late. You've got to rebuke first, ask questions later. Don't look at the stuff. Get out of there as fast as you can.
Yeah, and the thing people need to know is that what you're describing right now concerning the Fatima manifestations is that this information is based on the eyewitnesses.
Correct.
These are those who were there that day and made the original records, correct?
Correct. And it's not dressed up in religiosity, which is what happened. This became the Mary of the Bible and all this other stuff. And I think, with all due respect, it was not the Mary of the Bible. This is why I call Fatima a harbinger of deception. It's a dry run, a precursor, a preview of what is coming on the earth. 75. Look, it says that even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. 2 Thessalonians, and I realize Patty Aaron has a completely different interpretation of this. But when 2 Thessalonians chapter 4 says that day will not come until the great falling away comes first, pointing to the Antichrist. And I have done an exhaustive study on this, including a Greek scholar who actually can read the ancient Greek. The word is apostasia, which is where we get our word apostasy. It's an event. In Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, I quote a biblical scholar by the name of Keithley, who elaborates on this point and nails it home that what we're looking at is some sort of an event which causes this great apostasy. That begs the question, what event could cause some sort of great falling away that prophecy tells us about? And the short answer to that is, Tom, you see a 1 mile wide UFO craft over your head. Unless you know what you're looking at, just as Scripture tells us, just as the guidebook of the supernatural tells us, even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. That's what's coming. Men fainting from fear from what is coming on the earth. Well,
this seems to be even what the Royal Academy of Scientists, this dizzying intellect, as they describe them, are saying out of the UK right now, that aliens may be looking at us face to face. The good news is that our arms are wide enough to embrace Patty Heron too. Now, you mentioned the alien interviews, I saw that book being advertised by one of the syndicated Christian shows recently, Prophecy in the News, I believe. Tell us about this book just for a moment. We'll go back to the interview. But what's this book about? Who are the people that are being interviewed in this book, and how can people get a hold of it?
Well, right, it'll be available in the stores sometime in April, but right now it's available exclusively on my website. The alien interviews Dr. Jacobs, Dr. Roger Lear, Dr. Jesse Marcel, retired Major George Fowler, Dr. Lynn Katai, and Dr. Wenger all come on the record. You know, people with incredible, impeccable references. I mean, they're scholars in their own right. 5 PhDs, basically, and a retired major. All come on and discuss. For instance, Dr. Jacobs talks about the abduction scenario. Dr. Roger Lear discusses the alien implants. UFO sightings, Dr. Jesse Marcel, where it all began in Roswell, New Mexico. Retired Major George Fowler talks about that he actually chased a craft, decades ago, and from that became a believer. Dr. Lynn Katai, she actually photographed and the Phoenix Lights, why they were happening, both still shots and 35mm film. This is, of course, I think in '97, I think it was. And she filmed this, and eyewitness right there. And she comes on the record and discusses this. She also made a DVD called The Phoenix Lights and interviewed many, many people for that DVD, and it's an award-winning DVD. Dr. Wenger comes in and discusses the Shroud of Turin, and the reason why I bring that in, Tom, is because I believe that the Shroud is what I call God's calling card. And it speaks of a physics which we know nothing about. And it also gives us an idea, an overview, that this phenomena can best be explained by what is found in the guidebook to the supernatural, that we're dealing with physics which we know nothing about, a reality in another dimension which we know nothing about. We don't even know how to interface with it, which is why the guidebook of the supernatural is always telling us, you don't want to go there. You don't want to astral project or have spirit guides like the New Agers are always trying to tell us to do, because we're not equipped to deal in that dimension, and we're certainly not equipped to deal with the entities who inhabit that dimension. So that's a little bit about what the alien interviews is about. And then, of course, you've got people like Ricky Sorrell, who I mentioned before, Stevens the Lights, Whitney White Ashley, who's a reporter from the area, comes in and weighs in on that. Chuck and Stan Moser talk about their cattle mutilations on their ranch. Lynn Dickey, who is actually a UFO contactee, who is now a born-again Christian, who came out of the phenomena by using and evoking the name of Jesus. She's now born again. UFO contactee actually had telepathic communication with these beings, saw them. We'd go out and take pictures with a digital camera. There'd be nothing there. Lo and behold, the pictures would show craft. Actually, one of them made UFO magazine on the front cover. Of course, Joe Jordan comes in talking about the alien abduction. So that is a kind of an overview of what it's about. And from this book comes the phrase, UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. It's a perfect book. It's a primer to introduce a skeptic or to introduce someone who wants to know more about the phenomenon. And then from there you can branch out.
And we want to encourage people to visit your website and find out about the alien interviews. Again, what is the name of the website?
LAMarzulli.net, LAMarzulli.net, LAMarzulli, LAMarzulli.net.
And this will go into the commercial CD set that's going to be available to people, so they'll be able to look that up. And now, in addition to the alien interviews that you were just talking about, the book that is available to them, of course, you also are the author of numerous other books they can find out about over there. But now, you also had your own sighting this past year. Was this the first time?
No, this is the second time, Tom. We actually saw two this year. One very, very, very disturbing, bizarre sighting, and from that came, rebuke first, ask questions later. I realized that I became overwhelmed by what I was looking at. My wife, the first one I saw, I was 12 years old, hiking up a trail with 3 other Boy Scouts taking a shortcut back to lunch, and the lead boy goes, "Wow, look at that," and the other 2 guys go, "Wow, look at that," and I go, "Where?" They go, "There." They point. The sky is blue. There's a metallic silver disc floating in the sky. It looked about the size of my fingernail. If you held your hand out in front of you and put up your thumb, that's about what it looked like. The sun glinted off of it, and then it took off straight up in the air, literally in a twinkling of an eye. We ran back, and we said we saw a UFO, we saw a flying saucer. By 6 o'clock, the evening meal that night, the other 3 boys denied that they had ever seen anything, which is my first lesson in herd mentality and how people will deny what they have seen because they're afraid of ridicule and they want to be part of the pack. Well, nothing has changed, has it, that much? But 2009, my wife and I had been out at a local Italian restaurant. We had dinner. We were driving back. It was a clear night. It was around 8:30 in the evening, 8:30 in the evening. And she goes, "Wow, what's that?" Peggy was driving. And she goes, "Wow, what's that?" And I go, "Where?" She goes, "There." Points to the windshield. And I see this very large light. And at first I thought, when a plane comes at you with their light on, that's what it looked like. Very, very bright. But
hey, Lynn, we're going to run out of time in about 60 seconds, and I want you to tell me what if you have some final comments that you would like to make about what it was you did see, what it is that people ought to know, so we can make sure that that's a part of this series.
Okay. The bottom line is this: if you encounter one, immediately rebuke it. Rebuke first, ask questions later. These are not benevolent ETs from the planet Pleiades. Do not look into their eyes. If you see a craft, rebuke it. Get out of there as fast as possible. Don't mess with it.
And you saw something finally then this year?
Yeah, what I saw was a craft, and it as I was watching it, a smaller light appeared above it, and then slowly descended into the white light, into the craft, and then the craft disappeared with concentric rings, and as it disappeared, it just vanished. And I realized I'm seeing aerial phenomena that I'd never seen before. As I'm looking at the spot where it had vanished, about a minute later, bam, it was back. It's very bright. It did this like 2 or 3 times, sort of like a cat and mouse game. And I realized I got sucked into it and became overwhelmed by what I was seeing. This stuff is mesmerizing, Tom. That's why don't look at it, rebuke it, and get out of there.
We have been talking to L.A. Marzulli. He's one of the world's leading experts in this field. And, of course, out of all of the experts that we are talking to this week, whether it is L.A. Marzulli, Chuck Missler, Gary Stearman, or others, it is the theologians in this field that have most captured our imagination in what the scientists are now telling us is a very real possibility that we are going to be facing an extraterrestrial intelligence in the very near future. What does it mean to us? I would definitely point you towards these advocates of the scriptural interpretation, L.A. Marzulli and others. Len, thank you so much for being with us tonight on Raiders Live News Talk Radio.
Appreciate it, Tom and Nita. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Raiders Live News Talk Radio. We'll continue in a moment. Don't go away.